Hey there everyone, and welcome to our retrospective for Valkyria Chronicles 4. I feel like there should be a subtitle there. Valkyria Chronicles 4, The Quest for Valkyria. But there's not, so I guess I can't add one. Lame. Got a lot to talk about and did not actually record the second part of my art, so apologies that the art is going to be like crawling across the screen because I'm probably going to talk for longer than I have footage for, so I'll have to slow it down. Whoops! But you know what? That's okay. I'm allowed. My channel, my rules. So, a lot to get over. Let's go ahead and just move into it before I ramble on for 20 years, because that would be too long. First of all, just as a general summation for everyone knows, I do like this game a lot. I don't think it's going to be one of my best games of 2018, but I have a lot of respect for it and a lot of enjoyment from playing it. I think it did, in terms of the actual gameplay, everything was perfect. The missions were sufficiently hard. I did lose a couple of times, which is good. You don't want to just like one-shot the entire game. They were very varied. That sounds redundant. Yeah, and just in general, the actual game execution was fantastic. Almost all of the complaints I have, really actually all of the complaints I have to do with the story. So, let's go ahead and jump into those. Woohoo! Story-wise. Basically, the entirety of the Squad E backstory is ridiculous and stupid. Like, I really feel like they finished the game and then someone was like, oh, crap, we never gave them any backstory other than they're from Hoffen. We should probably put something about, you know, how they met the other members of the Squad because only some of them are from Hoffen. And then someone's like, I'm on vacation. Give it to that, like 6th grader that keeps coming around. And the 6th grader was like, oh, I know. We'll have one of the characters be pretending to be a boy and nobody notices, even though everyone talks about her ass all the time. And like we'll have a mission where on a firing range we'll have snipers shooting at their coworkers with non-lethal rounds, but we'll still knock them flat. Like, what the hell? So yeah, the whole Kai switching out for Lena thing and nobody actually knowing and them keeping a secret, even though the entire game nobody keeps it a secret. Like, every once in a while, they get in trouble with, don't say that, Raz, even though, like, everybody already knows. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, that strains my suspension of disbelief a lot. But once you get into the actual plotline of the game, I really have no complaints. It's kind of funny, if you go through and you see a scene and I'm like, well, that scene seems out of place, it's usually a scene that I feel like was just sort of, like, ham-rodded in order to check off some checklist. You know, and realistically, like, Squad E to the Beach is DLC, and I think it deserves to be DLC. I would have been annoyed if they had made that a mission, because it seems to have nothing to do with the ongoing plot. And as DLC, that's fine. If you want to pay extra in order to have characters run around in their bathing suits, go for it, you know? I absolutely do not mind stuff like that being in the game. I think it, you know, more choice is better. The steamy ceasefire scene is a little bit more, like, I get it, it's an anime game, and so they feel like I was actually just playing Trails of Cold Steel, and there was a mission about, you know, girls in the hot springs, and Persona 4 does it too, and it just seems to be something that anime games do. And I kind of wish they wouldn't, or at the very least, I mean, I am kind of glad. I feel like that interlude was put at the end of the game purely because they realized it really screwed up narrative flow. And also possibly because they wanted to sneak it by the censors. That's also a potential thing. But yeah, it just seems like that end up having characters overreact for the sake of the plot, and it's not a good. The biggest one, and I know I complained about at the time, and I'm sorry for being so bitchy about, like, small little pedantic points, but hey, that's what I do. That's why you're here. Like, the idea of you're on the verge of freezing to death, and you find a hot springs, and in the middle of taking a bath in a hot springs, you're going to, A, jump out of the hot springs to yell at a group of Imperials, and then B, not realizing you're standing stark naked in the middle of a fucking blizzard, like, until someone points it out. Like, no, that's completely implausible. I might give you that Riley is impulsive enough to not think about it and stand up and yell, but she's going to realize it fucking instantly. You know, whenever her nipples turn into ice shards, she's gonna be like, "Oh shit!" So that had no. But and again, I am. If they are going to have to put that in the game, I think that putting it after you beat the game the first time around is the way to do it, because it makes no narrative sense for that to happen. So, in terms of individual characterization, I did like most of the characters, but there's just a couple of places where things just didn't flow the way I felt like they should. The biggest example of that would be Kai/Lena. Like, both Kais have issues, but the Kai on our squad, the whole revelation that she was secretly working for her brother and reporting on ship movements and outright committing treason, and then Claude didn't really give a shit, like, that was weird as fuck. I'm sorry. I get that he's Claude, or she's Claude's childhood friend. I get that, you know, we are given some background in order to explain that she always was sort of subservient to her brother and just did whatever he told her to do, but you can't, like, she is probably... You remember how mad Minerva got at Claude because he was delayed and happened not to be present in order to try and hold off Waltz and the... I forget what their name is. The Aufwitz, or whatever it's called. That's not their actual name, but, you know, his squad. And yet nobody has an issue with the fact that Waltz only knew where the army was because Kai was reporting to her brother. like Waltz is indirectly responsible for what happened, and even then, not really. Had they been there, there's not a huge amount of... There's no real reason to think one extra squad, increasing their troop count by about, 12%, would have made the decisive difference. Although it might have. You know, they had actually fought with the Vulcan before, and they knew how to engage it. So, well, Claude may have been able to stop them, maybe not. It's hard to say. It definitely was strongly implied that whenever Waltz came back right before the Centurion showed up, that Claude was not going to be able to save, Squad E. So thinking that Squad E could have single-handedly stopped them is a little bit presumptive. But still, at the end of the day, Claude did go against orders, did stop to attack an Imperial base, and was delayed and unable to help out against the ambush in that case. And there was a lot, Minerva really tore into him over that, although I do feel like a little unfairly. It requires a bit of metagame knowledge in order for her to know when Claude should have showed up, depending on the, since he was the rear guard and fighting off Imperial assault the entire time. So I know I went over this, but I don't feel like she should have known he was late to that degree, because she had no idea what he'd been doing, but Claude was definitely responsible for that. However, no repercussion comes to Kai after she literally was committing treason and is literally responsible for that. So that was weird, and I didn't like that. As for the other Kai goes through a really, really cool arc that then doesn't have the narrative weight it needs to explain how it ends, in my opinion. What we end up with in terms of Fursetti, I guess I'll call him Fursetti so there's no confusion of which one I'm talking about. He starts off, captain in the Federation Army, and he comes to realize the Valkyria projects on Valkyrian children, and how they're basically like, hey little girl, do you want to be a bomb? And he is suitably disgusted by this. Absolutely, unequivocally, horrifically bothered, and fair enough. And he says, I cannot abide this. I'm going to betray the Federation, join the Empire, for the sole purpose of putting an end to their Valkyrian experiments. Cool. I like that characterization. I think it adds quite a bit to him. But then as the game goes on, the Valkyrias die, and he starts to become more and more and more unhinged, to the point where he only cares about Angie. He doesn't give a shit about any other Valkyria. He's got Chiara and Nicola, who... my guess is, have a little bit of Valkyrian blood, but not enough to actually use anything, and so have gone through experiments in order to augment and amplify what Valkyria powers they have in order to make them better soldiers, but they're not full on Valkyria. Forseti doesn't give a shit. Chrymeria is super unhinged and can't control her power and is, being threatened by being sent back to a lab and, cut apart for science. Forseti doesn't give a shit. Like, he starts off as this, you can't experiment on people, and he ends up with, I only care about this one Valkyria, and the bridge between the two extremes doesn't exist. So, I like Forseti's character as it begins. I don't like where it ends up, because it doesn't really make a lot of plausible sense that it ends up there. Like, I would have liked to know what is his ultimate plan? How is he going to save all of the Valkyria? Because from how his story starts, that should be his end goal. Speaking of Nicola and Chiara, that's another slight... I like Chiara. I don't know if she just has a character design that I really appreciate, but I really like her character. I really like her design. What I don't like is that I don't know fucking anything about them. Like I said, I'm having to presume that they have some Valkyrian, bloodline in them, but very, very little amounts, because they're really mean to Chrymeria when she's a full-on Valkyrian, like the purest Valkyria that exists, and no one else is. And then the whole, they have a detonator switch where they have to press a button in order to make it explode. It's just, I don't know who these characters are supposed to be. I can make assumptions, and I do make assumptions, but I don't know. And I would like to know. There's the whole, what are calibrations? I can definitely see that after they go through calibrations, it seems like their will is broken, but I don't know what is actually entailed there. And maybe I don't want to know what's entailed there. Maybe that's the point. Maybe I don't want to know what horrors these characters went through before I watch them die. Like, that's entirely plausible, but I don't really know who these characters are. And I kind of would like to. Getting back to the main class, or the main cast, another person with, in my opinion, unsteady characterization is Minerva. And granted, I will be the first to admit, when it comes to Minerva, it very well may be that I read into her character something that wasn't really there. And therefore, when it didn't stay true to what I thought it was going to be, I got mad. Like, that is 100% plausible, possible, potentially correct. But when I first met Minerva, I really felt she was introduced as a character that was extremely, extremely academic, book smart, really knew her shit. Like, Minerva was on point in terms of what... she was very, very well studied. She was calm, collected. She kind of reminded me of Akos from Valkyria Chronicles 2. Like, that was the character I thought that they were presenting me with. But then several times throughout the game, you would suddenly have emotionally unstable Minerva show up and just going off on a wild flip-out tangent. And... based on what I know of her, her tangents make sense. She was extremely, extremely committed to Squad F. And so when it came to avenging Squad F, she wasn't able to remain logical, and that makes sense. But I didn't see it. Like, it's one of those where I have a character, and the character acts a certain way, and then all of a sudden the character stops acting that way, and I'm left to figure out why. And, yeah, I'm able to put together a narrative that makes Minerva make sense, but... It does, push me back whenever I'm the one left to do that. The game doesn't actually do that for me, if that makes sense. Whenever Minerva is flipping out about Squad F, I should know why. I shouldn't be like, well, that's weird. Why is she acting like that? Oh, I bet it's because... And granted, that may be because I'm slow, and I was analyzing what I thought her character would be. I admit there's a bit of a blind spot for Minerva, because I like that character type, and she may have never been intended for that, and I just read too much into it. Entirely possible. Angie. I didn't think I would like Angie, but I think making a atom bomb into a high school girl adds a level of humanization and a level of moral dilemmas that are really good. It's not just... the moral dilemma of the atomic bomb is we're going to unleash this weapon that's going to be about 10% effective at destroying our enemies and have about 90% civilian casualties, and that's being generous. Like, it's an incredibly destructive weapon that will completely unreasonably target innocents. And so using it has a lot of moral quandaries, but whenever you add the fact that it's a little girl that was kind of pressured into joining in the first place, makes it a lot more morally ambiguous. I thought it sold the narrative very well. Unfortunately, that selling of the narrative, I kind of feel like we needed a little bit more discussion of it. You get a little bit with Claude and Riley, but overall there was... I don't feel as though they've spent enough time on that, but granted, I don't know what else they could have said, so it may have been fine. But I would have sort of liked to see a scene where, like, Claude and Raz or Kai or Riley are talking about how they can't go through with this. They can't just blow up a little girl, even if it means winning the war. And then they say, okay, what do we do about it? Do we, defect and fight against the Federation and let the Empire, continue their advance and just really come to terms with the fact that they don't have another path forward at this point? I narratively can see that they don't have a path going forward, but it feels like they never really struggle with that decision. There's a little bit of unease about it, and then Claude says, well, this is what we're doing, and then Riley's like, okay. And it's bothersome, Whenever they run on there and are about to detonate Angie, there's... Like, Claude has to fight with himself to not blow up a little girl, and it felt really weird. Minerva, again, with what we know about her and what we decide about her, her reactions make sense, although I will admit when I watched that scene, I misinterpreted the ceasefire as... okay, the war is over, let's stop fighting and draw up peace terms. I didn't think about the fact that the ceasefire, might only be for a couple of hours. So Minerva's reaction there makes a lot more sense. And I also go back and I'm like, okay, well, Minerva also had no real way of knowing that Minerva had no actual way of knowing that the bomb was Angie, because she was not privy to that revelation. So Minerva's fine in that scene, but I feel like Claude should have been more relieved and less indecisive about it whenever the chance to not blow up Angie presented itself. Riley, this might be just because I am a little bit... I've played too many games, I've seen too many stories, but Riley to me is the least interesting member of Squad E. And I feel like she's supposed to be either the second or third most interesting. Like, she's Claude's, significant other. She's the person that Claude's probably going to end up marrying. And I feel like Valkyria Chronicles 1, Alicia was interesting. I liked her as a character. I thought she was pretty awesome. She was a little bit bland overall, but you still liked her. Riley just was kind of in the game. And I really never found myself giving a shit about her. And maybe it was because of the way she was introduced and the whole, the Imperials came in and invaded my factory and set it on fire, but I'm going to blame a 9-year-old kid for being scared. Like, it just set me up with a vision of Riley as someone who is an engineer but super illogical, but then is supposed to be this great inventor even though she, constantly blows herself up. And I was just like, no, I can't get on board with this character. I apologize. And then Claude himself. I've got to say, I was surprised. There are some issues I have with Claude. Like I said, his reluctance to not blow up Angie kind of made him falter a bit for me. But overall, I think I like Claude more than Welkin. I really do. I didn't think I would. I really, really, really loved Welkin as a character. I was really glad that he was a somewhat subdued military person that was more interested in science and books and learning things than a hoorah military. So I really thought Welkin was a genius character, but Welkin had the disadvantage of he was on the unequivocal good guy team. Welkin didn't ever have to wrestle with the possibility that his actions weren't moral. He never had to wrestle with the question of, is what he's going ahead with, or Welkin did not have to wrestle with, is this something he is really allowed to do? And Claude had to overcome a lot of moral questions and doubts. I do feel like Claude got a little bit off the hook a little bit easily. I don't feel like Kai's situation actually got resolved at all. And I feel like there should have been more discussion there, but I feel like Claude had a harder trail to walk through, and he persevered. Whereas Welkin was just like, these guys are Nazis, let's kill them! So, I don't want to say Claude is a better character than Welkin, but Claude's journey is a more interesting journey than Welkin's. And I end up really, really, really appreciating Claude. And lastly, let's talk about the greatest character, well, the greatest two characters in Valkyria Chronicles 4. As a sort of side, Dr. Belgar is a cliche. I did not find him interesting at all. But Waltz, I really feel like Valkyria Chronicles 4 would be a significantly weaker game if not for Waltz, which is why I'm drawing him. Waltz, there's a lot of really heavy topics in Valkyria Chronicles 4. There's, a town being invaded and a factory being lit up because the director doesn't want to release a weapon of mass destruction. There is a what am I trying to say? I don't even know. What am I trying to say? There's, genocide, the destruction of an entire city by sacrificing a little girl that doesn't even know what she agreed to. There is genocide of an entire group in order to plant a spy on a ship. Like, there's a lot of pretty heavy themes in Valkyria Chronicles 4, and it would be easy to get mired down with that plot. And then, you can have kind of the upbeat Squad E, and that would help, but Waltz, by himself, really, really, really keeps the game fun. I think he does more than any other character to keep the game fun. He is hilarious. Every scene he was in, I appreciate it. And part of the reason I appreciate him so much is that they didn't overdo him. He seems a very plausible character. He kind of reminds me of, I forget his name, Inspector Campanella from Ghost Trick. Like, he's fun, he's carefree, he doesn't take himself too seriously, but he's competent, and he's still dangerous. He's not like a Biggs and Wedge character where he's a comic relief villain that you just, stomp over. Like, he's a threat. He's up there, but he also just has... He's just a soldier, and he's there in order to keep the seriousness of the Empire's actions from overwhelming the plot and dragging the game down to a level of seriousness that you don't want it to be at. Waltz is beautiful and wonderful. And the counterpoint to Waltz is Raz. Raz has one of the best character developments I've ever seen since freaking Luke from Tales of the Abyss. Raz starts out as my least favorite member of Squad E. Lower even than Riley. I could not stand Raz. Raz was the frat boy, stupid, I'm gonna do what I want, I'm invincible, little ignorant douche nozzle. I hated him. I couldn't stand Raz. And then honestly, he was like that the whole time up until Kai almost died. And then you get one of the best scenes in the entire game, possibly the best scene in the entire game, in my opinion. It's one of two, and the other one is also going to be talked about in reference to Raz, where they have this discussion after you get there and you get Kai out, and Raz is like, oh my god, and then Claude, I think it's Claude, is just like, dude, that's how we feel every time you're an idiot and run off by yourself, We care about you, you big dumb lummox. And you get this moment, and the animation is so good, where he's like, holy shit, I'm making everyone else feel the way I just felt? And it's just, after that, his character becomes more subsumed, and he starts listening and working as a team, and it's realistic, natural, amazing character growth. I really, really appreciate Raz. Up until the end, where he, fully cognizant of how much this is going to hurt his friends, is like, no, Claude, you know damn well that this mission is mine. I'm the best shot you've got at saving the entire fucking ship. But you're a captain now, and you have to tell me to do this. All right, this is going to be a decision that you have to stand by. And I need you to tell me that I'm needed to die. And it was so powerful, and it was so emotional, and it's just, those two scenes are the strongest scenes in Valkyria Chronicles 4. And why Raz is my favorite character. I almost wish I had drawn Raz instead, or drawn both of them, but hey, time takes time, and I couldn't. So, that said, you know, my summation of the game, and my decision as to how strong a game as it actually is as it actually is, I am so good at speaking. My summation is that Valkyria Chronicles 4 has a lot of issues. The narration is... There's some plot elements that I really disagree with. I feel like they dropped the ball a little bit in presenting their story. But at the end, it has real and actual character development that I love. Any game that can actually has a sweeping narrative and make me feel for the characters is a great game. It's incredibly enjoying to play, and it gets back to what Valkyria Chronicles is. I was not impressed by Valkyria Chronicles 2. From what I understand, Valkyria Revolution just tanked because they tried to change the game type, and everyone said, fuck you, we don't want you to change the game type. And then this brings the series back home, and it does so wonderfully. You know, I'm supposed to put up 2 episodes a day, and very often Valkyria Chronicles took up too much time, and I wasn't able to actually put 2 episodes up, and I apologize. I know the people watching my other series probably got frustrated by that, but I just, you know, I was enjoying playing this one too much, and I wasn't willing to skip it. But we're done now. We're back to our daily uploads. Look forward to it.